The skill level in Fall Guys has been rising slowly after the game's release. Most people can even make it through Seesaw now. It's not as easy to qualify in each round as it once was. So maybe you're new to the game or just finding yourself struggling to get to that final round as often as you once did. Either way, you've come to the right place. My name is Redgar the Blue, and I'll be your guide for getting more chances at that win during your Fall Guys matches. So without further ado, welcome to the Consistent Crowns course. Each video in this series will cover a different minigame and provide you with a strategy and tips to consistently qualify on that round. So let's jump on into this one. Welcome to DoorDash. This is an obstacle course type minigame. You will encounter DoorDash primarily in round 1, but it can show up in round 2 as well. DoorDash can be tricky because it is simultaneously the hardest and easiest of the obstacle courses. It is easy to complete, but there is also very little room for error, as your opponents aren't having a hard time either. As always, let's begin with our flyover of the course. As you can see, this one is just a straight line to the finish, and the only obstacles are these funny looking mouth doors. The obstacle part of these doors is that some are real and some are fake. Now let's get to our analysis and example completion. If you'd like to skip directly to the strategy summary section, you can go to the timestamp on the screen now. It will also be in the description down below. DoorDash, like most other obstacle courses, is an early round minigame. It is important to qualify on these if you want a consistent shot at the crown. DoorDash may give the least amount of control to determine this outcome though, so general good play is important here. However, there are some good tips to use when running through the course. Let's begin at the start of the course. It's going to depend what you do here on whether or not you're starting in the front or further back. As a side note, I won't comment on the starting position much because in this series we're going to focus on what we can do to consistently qualify. And we have no control over starting position, we just have to work with what we get. So at the start of DoorDash, it's a mad rush to the front row of doors. If you're starting in the front row, I do generally suggest to go for one of the doors and try to jump through it. But as you can see, you will get bounced off and often fall over if it's a fake door. Because of that, if you're starting further behind, it's often a good strategy to wait for the real doors to be found by others instead of trying to find the door yourself. Now let's talk about the doors themselves. The very first thing to keep in mind when you're running through this course is that you have to jump through the doors, even the open ones. The ground is raised up a little bit, so you do have to hop over. So just keep that in mind so you don't trip or get pushed behind. As you proceed through the course, you're going to quickly know that the biggest obstacle is not actually the doors themselves, but other people. Basically, you have to fit 60 people, or sometimes 45-ish if it's a round 2 course, through several small doors in the course, and since everybody's running together, they bunch all up, and it can be very hard to get yourself actually through the door. If you can get lucky and in front of the crowd, you won't have any problems at all, but picking the wrong door and bouncing off of it can sometimes push you behind. For that reason, it's generally worth the risk if you're at the front to just go for a door, especially a door that you think is the right one. Because if you can get through first, then you're not going to have to deal with all the other people coming up behind you. When you are jumping through the doors, you can just hop through the gap if you're in the front or there's not many people. However, as we discuss in this series, when you're in the air, you're at your most vulnerable to other people pushing you around. You have very little control when you're off the ground. Therefore, jumping can be a risky business because you'll have other people diving into you and potentially knocking you off to the side, and then you won't be able to get through the mad rush of people, all trying to funnel through that very small space. Because of this, I recommend, if you aren't with only a few people going through the door or at the front, jump and dive. Jump a little ways back with enough room for your dive to get you through the door. Your dive is going to generally provide you with a lot of forward momentum that's much harder to disrupt by other players bumping into you than just a simple hop. So dive through the door and it's going to get you through more often than not. Next up is our route through the course. Unfortunately, because the doors are random, which is real and which is fake each time, we don't have a specified route through the course. However, the other way to look about it is that the course really only has one route, and it's straight ahead to the finish line as quickly as possible. Now, our route here is really going to depend on what doors we go through. If we're further back and we're following people who are opening doors for us, they're going to determine the route, and our job is just to play as good as we can, diving through the doors for safety and trying to avoid getting knocked over by other people. If there's more than one door open, you're really going to want to try to go for the door with less people jumping through it. Oftentimes, even if you're farther away from the door with less people, it's an optimal high percentage choice to go for the door with less people. It seems like it's going to cost you more time, but in the end, it will often actually put you closer to the front. However, if you are in the front of the pack, you're probably going to have to make the choice to go through some doors. Which door you pick is going to depend on some things. While it is random, I have found, and I don't have proof of this, but it's worked well for me, that certain doors are much more likely to be the correct door. I find the doors to be least often the correct door are the very center doors. The second most least are the doors on the very edge. This means your optimal target is going to be the doors sort of in between the center and the very edge. We're talking the doors sort of one door, two doors, and on the first couple rows, even 3 doors in from the edge of the course. Specifically, I like to go for the right side almost every time. I've had games where doing nothing else other than this, I was able to pass through each door and get all the way to the finish without having to stop at all. Now, whether or not that's true in the full statistics of the game, it's hard to say. But it's worked for me, and I suggest you give it a try for yourselves. There is a little bit more to it as well. I do notice on some of my runs through this map that some of the doors just look a little different. Sometimes you can see like a crack of opening in the door or a similar malformation. These doors usually end up being the correct door to go through, at least in my cases. Now, the correct doors don't always seem to have these. I'm not sure if you have to look from a very specific angle. But if you see a door and it feels in your gut like it's the right one, it's worth going for. It may not be, but that's an option. However, on the final 3 rows of the course, we do have something that you can actually use to get through the correct door every time. And now the fact that these doors do have a tell leads me to believe that even doors further back also have tells, thus these sort of odd looks to them, but it's much harder to tell before you get to the final 3 rows. You'll notice when you do get to the final 3 rows that the doors have sort of the angles of the stripes coming down on them form a little pink triangle at the bottom of the door opening, where the 2 sides would come together. You can tell which door is the correct door by the one that has the smaller of these triangles. You'll see an example here on screen of it. If you look closely, you can see that the correct door that I jumped through here actually does have a smaller triangle at the bottom. I don't know if this is going to last forever or if it's intentional. It may get patched out. But if you're running through your maps and you have to pick a door, try to do a quick determination of triangle size when you're at the back here and jump through that door. At least for now, it's going to work almost every time. Finally, we have the end of the course. It's a giant ledge you have to fall off of through the last door to get to the finish line. The main thing to watch out for here is going to be that when you get to the ground, there's going to be people falling behind you, and they can keep falling on your head, knocking you over, and basically push you to the back of the crowd, and you can lose that way pretty easily. To avoid this, I generally recommend when you get through that final door, dive and try to dive to one of the sides, or if you get a really good jump and you just dive straight forward, it should bring you out of the crowd. And then you can get up and run to the finish line and qualify, no problem. Now let's put all these thoughts into action with our example completion. We're close enough to the front that we're going to try to go for a door. I see something odd with this middle door and it ends up being a good choice. We try it again here as the risk would be worth getting ahead. It doesn't get us there. That dive pushes us through the door when otherwise we might have gotten jostled around. Here we can just hop and we're moving forward. We see a door open, we go for it, another hop gets us through, and now we're to the point where we can determine the doors via the triangles. We see the one second from the left, and it's correct, somebody gets it before us. Here, it's the rightmost door. We run towards it, dive through, just in case, and it's just a clean finish from here. You can see that it only takes a couple seconds for the rest of the people to finish and the round is over. So if you're behind the crowd a little bit, it's very easy to not qualify here if you make a mistake earlier on. You have to be pretty quick on your feet with this one, but using the methodology of this course, you should be able to consistently qualify and move on to the next round. That brings us to our strategy summary. Our first point is, unless you're in the front, wait for other players to find the correct door for you. Next, when you're near other people going through the same door, try to dive through to maintain forward momentum and reduce jostling. Next, when on the last 3 rows, the doors with the smaller bottom triangle will be the correct doors. Finally, dive off the ledge at the end to avoid falling players. Let's jump in to the tips and tricks of the course. I find that the doors 1 or 2 in from the right edge of the track to have a high percentage chance of being the correct door. If 2 doors are opened in the next row that you're proceeding up to, choose the one with less people, even if it's farther away. Lastly, we have our things to watch out for the course. There's nothing major here, as DoorDash is generally pretty safe. There's not a lot you can do to really mess up your run, or that other players can do to affect you. However, there are a couple points. First of all, the large rush of players can completely immobilize you when you're trying to go through a door and push you all the way to the back of the pack. This can also happen at the end when other players are falling on your head. Finally, other players can grab you at the wrong moments, which can make things messy. They can grab you right as you're trying to jump through a door, mess up that jump, and then you get pushed to the edge as the crowd comes through. Or occasionally vindictive players will grab you right at the end when you're trying to get through the finish line. Generally, this doesn't help them at all, but it can stop your progress enough that you actually don't qualify. So stay vigilant and be ready to jump out of their grasp if somebody does decide to grab you. That sums it up for this lesson of the Consistent Crowns course. Thanks for watching. I hope you found it helpful, and if you have any tips and tricks of your own that I missed, post them in the comments below. I would love to hear them, and so will the rest of the community. If you liked the video, please hit that like button and consider subscribing as well. It will help more players who are struggling find this course, and I greatly appreciate the support. Now get out there and win some crowns.